Working from home tips. So some basic tips, and I pulled 4 major bullet points, which is knowing what your employer expects. I would think that a lot of us at this point, we should know what that is. Working at home and how it's different from working in the office or at your work location, how to separate your home and work life, and being kind to yourself. So I have previously, before coronavirus, if I say BC, that's what I mean when I say BC is before coronavirus, I had a couple of other experiences where I had worked from home once because an office was undergoing a major renovation, another time just because that was my job. So I feel like I have a little bit of insight. I had some insight coming into this that other people might not have had. So when we talk about knowing what your employer expects, you have to think about, is it feasible? Is it doable? Is it reasonable for your situation? And what does that mean? Like, what is reasonable? So if you're a single parent with multiple kids in the home and they want you to be streaming live on Facebook all day, every day without interruption, that's probably not very feasible. Someone gave me a stat the other day that Parent Network has done over 100 little chats or presentations like this since coronavirus came. I can't even count how many times, I've seen someone's kid walk up or walk into the room, or see a parent have to like mute themselves and turn away. And sometimes it's husbands or wives, sometimes it's kids, sometimes it's dogs. So there's a variety of things, but the expectation of what you can do at home when your spouse and children and whoever else might live with you is also at home is probably not the same of what was feasible or doable when you're working out of your office. So when you think about what your employer is expecting and having that conversation with them about what is and is not realistic, it may have changed now that school is out for the summer. But if your children had to participate in like Zoom or GoToMeeting educational sessions, that might be time when you couldn't get work done because you had to support your child in their online education. So thinking about that and talking to your employer, and if your situation changes, like having that open dialogue and discussion about what is reasonable, so that way nobody's blindsided. Nobody's like, oh, what do you mean you couldn't get this work done? So if you're communicating that on the front end, that is going to help you out throughout the course of your work from home experience. And so working at home and working in the office is different because you're less productive. I find that it's easier to be distracted by something going on around you. It's easy to, think about things like, oh, I forgot to do X, Y, or Z last night. I'm going to go take care of that now and then come back to this in a second. It's also, you might have technology issues. Maybe you have a poor internet connection. So you're constantly, losing work that you're trying to do, or you can't access a database online. So things like that are going to affect your productivity. We talked about the expectations being different. Your work hours may be different. If your kids are at home, and if you have a spouse and you and your spouse work different shifts, and you don't have daycare right now because daycares are closed, or school was your child care, you might have to work your hours more so in the evening once your spouse gets home so that you can, supervise your children during the day. So it's not the same, so don't treat it like it's the same. Hopefully everybody's employers are reasonable and can understand that there are differences in the productivity and the expectations, but again, having those conversations on the front end, or I guess on the front end, it's probably too late now, but if you need to have those conversations, I would recommend having them sooner than later. separating home and work life. I always make a joke about, I don't know if I'm working from home or homing from work, because it all kind of blends together. And I had talked to some parents and I gave them some tips, because they found that they were working over the course of all their waking hours. So maybe they would do something for an hour or two in the morning before their kids got up, and then they'd have to attend to some work related task. And then they'd have to assist their kid with their online education. And then they could have some time to get some work done. And then the kids were hungry and wanted dinner, so they'd have to stop working and make dinner. And then they'd go back to doing some work. So if you're spreading your work out over the course of your entire day, you're never giving yourself that off time, which is important to designate and separate home and work. So if at all possible, if you can have a separate space, that's awesome. If you can have a separate space with a door, that's even more awesome. But try not to work when you're not working. So if your work hours are 8 to 4 or something akin to that, at 6 o'clock, if you're like, oh, I forgot to send this email, it can wait till tomorrow. If you were you wouldn't drive back to your office to send that email if you were working at work. So just say it's going to have to wait. So try to separate those as much as you can. And being kind to yourself. So everything seems to cause extra amounts of stress right now. So be okay with not finishing everything. When you do take a break, if you're having lunch or a 15-minute break or things like that, leave your little physical workspace. Maybe go outside, take a walk around the block, so you feel like you're removing yourself from that workspace. And just cut yourself some slack. Know that this is hard for everybody. It's different for everybody. The expectations are going to change differently for everybody. And all those things are okay. So let yourself be okay with that. So some of the things that I have found that is very important when working from home is how we're communicating with others. So we talked a little bit about, talking to your boss, your supervisor, about the barriers, challenges, expectations. There are some bosses who might be a little more hands-off, which I love that. I'm a pretty self-directed person. I don't need someone, reminding me what to do or giving me tasks. And I will always, or almost always, ask if there is something that I need, but not everybody is me. So if you need to, set up a communication mechanism where you and your boss exchange, an email once a week, just giving updates, set up time. I don't know, in my social worker world, it's called supervision, but it's like a check-in time. Like, this is what's going on with me. This is what I'm doing well with. This is what I need help with. And this is, some of the barriers or challenges that I'm facing, and see if they can help you through that. It's also super important to try to think creatively about how you're communicating with your coworkers. I close my email now when I'm doing like little online presentations like this, or else every 15 seconds you would hear like a ding, ding, ding for a new email. So, or if you and a coworker are working on something together and you have your part and they have their part, you need to make sure that you're communicating like, okay, this is a draft, this is a final version, this is what I'm working on, this is what's in progress, this is what I need help with. Oh, I put accepting help twice. And then asking people to make adjustments to their communication as necessary based on everybody's different needs. Maybe somebody prefers email, somebody else prefers a phone call, somebody else prefers a text message, and somebody else prefers like a video chat. So, but I have found that the better that you can communicate with your coworkers, the more it's going to help with your productivity, which does suffer during times of work from home. So, and then there's the communication with your friends and family. If you have to change your work schedule to adjust for whatever crazy times we're in, letting everybody know that is going to be important. If you can make a visual schedule to hang on the door of your workspace or get a dry erase board, if you need to share internet time, if you have insufficient bandwidth, make sure you're scheduling meetings not at the same time as other people who are streaming video in another room. Putting up a do not disturb sign, letting your kids maybe know what's an acceptable break time if they need help with something. And making sure that in all this that you're talking to your friends so you can vent, you can have fun, you can express the things that are stressing you out. Because again, your workday can consume all 24 hours of your day when you're working from home, and it can be hard to differentiate out some of those differences. All right, and then now we're going to get into how to communicate some of this stuff to your children, spouses, teenagers, whoever it is that's in your house with you, that is having a hard time kind of getting it. So I'm going to pause for a second, take a sip of my coffee. If anybody has a question so far, feel free to type, unmute yourself, anything. Okay. So one of the reasons that our productivity suffers when we're working from home is because it's really easy to get distracted. So you want some visual aids. I put a do not disturb sign outside the door of this little room, and I write the time on it. So it says, today it said do not disturb 8:15 to 10:15. Or you can get one of those, I'll be back at whatever time. Sometimes if you go to like a small hair salon that's just like one lady who works there, works out of her home, she might put that, and there's a picture of it on there, like the little clock where you can change the hands. So maybe you're not physically leaving, but if you're in a meeting and you can't be interrupted, if you can put out something like that and that will let your children know, like, okay, right now, I can't bother mom or dad, but in 15 minutes I can. So those visual aids are going to be helpful. Post your work hours. So some people's work hours are always the same, some vary wildly. So if you can communicate with the other people in your home the hours that you're working on each day, that's going to be beneficial when they're planning for the day, planning for the next day. And provide reminders. If you're going into a meeting and you can't be disturbed, 15 minutes before that, maybe say to your children, hey, I have to go into a meeting. I'm going to be unavailable for an hour. Is there anything you need? Is there something you need help with? Do you know what you're going to be doing during that hour to keep yourself occupied? If they don't know what they're going to be doing, maybe that's something that you can help them figure out. Maybe it's really nice out and they can go for a bike ride. Maybe they have a chore that they need to do. Maybe they have to read part of a book for school, whatever it might be. Help them figure out and plan for that time, so that will reduce the likelihood that you will be interrupted or distracted. So having that physical workspace, like I said, I'm lucky enough I have this separate room. I have a significant other who is out in the dining room, but he does need that visual aid that says, like, do not disturb me during these certain times, which is fine. People need that. And if you have to be set up in a dining room or in a common space of your house, is there something that you could make, like a fake physical barrier or a makeshift physical barrier? Like, do you have like a gate for your dog or something that you can put up? Because that physical barrier is going to remind someone, I have to stop, and that's going to give them a second to think and process, what does that mean when there's a physical barrier here? Oh, wait, that means I shouldn't go in. Let's check the schedule. Is this a time when my parents working? Are they in a meeting? Can they not be distracted? and I don't know if it's possible for everybody, but I have to do this to keep the house section of my house that I want air conditioned. I have like a tension rod that you would use like for curtains or a shower curtain or things like that, and I have it across the hallway with a curtain on it to keep the air conditioning into one half of the house, because the back half of the house, it's just our air conditioning unit's not big enough. So, but that's something that you could also do for a work from home situation, just to create that physical barrier. It's kind of like when kids are littler and it's out of sight, out of mind. If they can't see it, then it's like it's not there. But if you're sitting there and they see you, instead of trying to figure out what happened to their favorite t-shirt, they're going to immediately ask you instead of just going to try to find it. So if you can create that physical barrier, even if it doesn't reduce sound or distractions or things like that, it's a visual barrier, and that's going to be helpful. Reducing noise. I see a lot of people use headphones and things like that during Zoom meetings. That can be super helpful because it might help block out some of the noise of things that your kids are doing, or if your dog's barking. And those are things that can be distractions. It can also help you increase your focus and concentration, or even if it's not during an online meeting, if you just have headphones in and are listening to a podcast or music. And for that designated workspace, if there is a change in a schedule or routine, meetings get rescheduled all the time, then post that in your designated workspace. So this morning session about working from home was rescheduled from a couple weeks ago, so maybe that's a change in your schedule. So where you have your work hours and things posted, write that on there. And then getting input from your kids regarding the schedule and routine and what that looks like. Let them have some input. The more input your kids have, to a degree, the more buy-in they're going to get. So if their online education is something they can do anytime, it's not at a set specific time for a meeting, and we know that they have to do, I don't know, algebra, and they struggle with algebra, maybe their school time or their math time isn't the same time when you have an important meeting, because then they might get frustrated, they might then display some challenging behaviors, and that's going to become a distraction and disruption to you doing your work. So maybe schedule that math time or algebra time for a time when you know that you'll be able to assist them. Or even if you can't assist with algebra, at least be supportive of them. So they do that whole Common Core math stuff, and it's so much different than what we did 25 years ago. So, and try to match up like kids events and work events. Not that they're the same thing, but so that they complement one another. So if they have a time where they're doing some kind of online video game thing with their friends, and you know that they're going to be occupied for X amount of time, and nothing, not even the smoke alarm, is going to get them to stop doing X thing, then maybe that's a good time for you to schedule, phone calls or meetings, or, hunker down to get the end of month statistics done, or whatever it is, because you know that that's a good time for you to not be interrupted. That being said, if your bandwidth is kind of stinky, if someone's streaming a video game and you're trying to do a Zoom meeting at the same time, you might want to reconsider that. But that's what I mean when I say match it up. So maybe it's, they need to do a quiet activity because you need to stream video. Maybe there's certain times. I know when I was a kid in the summer, if it was a nice day out, my parents would lock me outside and be like, come back when the sun sets. Not literally, but they'd be like, you need to go outside and play for a few hours. Bye. So maybe that's what you have them do. Maybe they need to go to the store and grab a gallon of milk so you can have what you need to make dinner. So those are good opportunities for you to do work events or activities that can't be interrupted. And then explain and set what the work rules mean. So if your do not disturb sign is up, if the dog got away and is running down the street and biting someone, okay, maybe that's something that you need to be disturbed for. If they're trying to make themselves a grilled cheese sandwiches and they burnt themselves, maybe you need to be disturbed for that. If they feel really sick and they have asthma, so they're at increased risk for, complications with coronavirus, maybe that's something they interrupt you for. So some kids, especially kids with disabilities and like autism and developmental disabilities, can be very black and white. So they might see that do not disturb and take it too literally and just, and then there's a situation where a parent should be disturbed, whether they're at home or in their office. And because the sign's being taken literally, it's not. So talk about what that means. So if it's, maybe you use 911 as an example. If it's not something you would call 911 for, then you shouldn't disturb me. If it's not something you would call me at my office for, then you shouldn't disturb me. So use examples and situations that your kids can relate to. If it's not if your kid was at school and the teacher wouldn't call home for X, Y, or Z situation, then that's what the do not disturb sign means. Let people know when it's okay to interrupt. So if you don't have the do not disturb sign up, does that mean it's okay to interrupt? Does that mean it's okay to come in and ask for help? And then what will that help look like? And also set up what is absolutely positively like off limits and what is acceptable. So maybe you have a list of things that they can do when you are in a do not disturb mode. So it's, they can do their chores, their schoolwork, or play a board game. But what is absolutely off limits might be streaming video, going to a friend's house, or whatever else it might be. So in that way, if they know, okay, I have these things to choose from under these circumstances, then they're less likely to be like, Mom, I'm bored. Another thing that has worked for some parents is to have, I call it an I'm bored jar, which is just if you have like a mason jar or any kind of little jar, I guess. You can just have a little piece of paper or popsicle sticks and you write on it every time your kid says, I'm bored. They have to draw a stick out of the jar and they have to do that thing. So that way, even if you're in a place where you can be interrupted, if they're interrupting your work to tell you that they're bored, then you can be like, oh, you got to draw a stick and do whatever it says. Just make sure that the things that are written on there are things that they can actually do when they say they're bored. Because if it's like, oh, you have to, juggle fire, probably not a good idea. Okay, so those are some things that might be helpful with kiddos, and I'm sure there's bazillions more things or different kinds of challenges that people have that haven't been covered, but that's why we have a Q&A. So let's pause again and see if we have any questions so far. All of it makes kind of logical sense. Yeah, but sometimes it's stuff that we don't think of too, so. All right, so now we need to keep our kids occupied, right? So let's post a list of options or choices of what they can do. But make sure, and we kind of touched on this with the last slide, make sure we're accounting for things like weather changes. So yesterday, depending on where you live, there may or may not have been thunderstorms, or it was sunny and then 5 minutes later it was torrential downpour and then it was sunny again, and that was kind of back and forth. So if their plan is to go outside and play, and then it's a monsoon, okay, now we need an alternative. If they don't have an alternative and you don't want to be disturbed, now you're going to be disturbed. So have those different options. Talk about what the kids can do if you have more than one kid at home when they're arguing, because that's another thing that parents have brought up to me, is that the kids might be fine until, you know, Mom, he touched my stuff, or he won't take turns, or my sister this, or my brother that, whatever it might be. So talk about with your kids like what that looks like and what each of them can do in those situations if you can't be disturbed. So we're planning ahead, we're giving choices, we're holding them responsible and getting their buy-in by letting them decide some of these things. And maybe, you know, you're working with your child about not being so withdrawn and spending all their time in their room on their cell phone or something like that. In the circumstances which we find ourselves, that might be something we have to give in on so that we can get our work done at home and not have, you know, Bobby and Sally, you know, in the hallway pulling each other's hair out while you're trying to, you know, have a board meeting or something. So there are a lot of virtual events, activities. I recently found a lot of different, like, I guess they're calling them like summer camps and stuff for kids. Some of them are kind of expensive, but there's a lot of free ones too. If you go to, oh my goodness, it's something about Buffalo and kids. I don't know, I'll look it up and let you guys know. But you can sort it by virtual activities, in-person activities, different days of the week, what age groups, what kind of activities you're looking for. So they had that one, and I know a lot of kids like Minecraft, and that other one that's way more violent. I can't think of what it's called right now. I don't know. It's
Fortnite.
What is it?
Fortnite.
Yes, Fortnite.
Oh yes.
That game is violent, but not graphic.
Yes.
But there's one I found that's like it's like a Minecraft. It's like a Minecraft play date kind of thing. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like someone set up like a little group for that. There's a lot of Facebook groups that are being set up for different kind of virtual play things, parent things. It's really going to depend on the age of your kiddo. There's a lot more need, I think, for things for like tweens and teens. But I feel like they are also a little harder to keep entertained because socialization can be such a big part of their life, and that's kind of hard to get right now. So, you know, talk about acceptable indoor activities, movies, puzzles, board games, video games, chores, schoolwork, just trying to create something out of nothing. Like I said, before coronavirus, I spent a lot of my time going into other people's houses, and now I'm just in my own house. So I'm like, well, how can I teach someone how to implement these sensory diet things when they don't have the right sensory equipment? So I've spent a lot of time at home just futzing around with stuff that's probably in most people's homes and been like, oh, this would work for X, Y, or Z. Actually did a whole sensory DIY with just stuff like paper towel and toilet paper tubes, bowls, cotton balls, you know, just like how you can get different sensory input from just stuff around your house. So, you know, maybe you like ask them to play MacGyver and do some arts and crafts and just be like, hey, I have these 3 random supplies. I want you to make something out of it. Like, so you're going to have to think creatively and think outside of the box a little bit. But I have found a lot of really fun things to just do around my house. I created what I call bottle bowling. So like I just saved empty plastic bottles and filled them up like different amounts, so they're different weights. And then I just have like a, I don't know, like a dodgeball kind of ball, and I just roll it down my hallway and we play bowling. Um, so see, you know, just you got to be creative. I also created a twister game out of paper plates, and you stick them to the kitchen floor. And instead of, I don't have a spinner, so I just used a printable blank dice and just put like hand, foot, and just wrote on them and played twister by coloring the center of paper plates different colors and taping them to the linoleum in the kitchen. So thinking creatively. But now, thankfully, most outdoor activities are permitted. So they can always, you know, go to the park, play in the yard, go on a bike ride. Again, if they're old enough and able to do so. Again, think about what your kid's able to do, what's appropriate for their age, their disability, if they have one, and help them create a list of the things that they can do. And then also make sure they have a list of coping skills or relaxation techniques, things that they can use. If they are getting stressed out, if they have a fight with their friend, or they're struggling with their homework, because if that's occurring and you can't be disturbed during your work time, they need a way to manage those emotions and feelings. So, you know, maybe it's doing deep breathing exercises, maybe it's putting on a meditation video, maybe it's doing some kind of heavy weight task if they're very sensory. So maybe you have a laundry basket filled up with cans of soup that they can push across the floor. Just a variety of different things that they can do to help keep themselves relaxed, calm, or cope with the situation until the parent becomes available to help them out if they need it. All right, any questions regarding that slide? Okay, so some additional tools to help kids or whoever in your house understand. Visual schedules, those little door hangers, like you have at a hotel room, like, no, I don't want housekeeping today. You could make something like that for your doorknob. Timers can be very beneficial because that's going to give a visual aid and also a auditory alert to when, like, oh, mom's meeting is over or lunch break is over, time to go back to the next whatever task is next. The timers that I usually use when I go to people's houses are just from the dollar store. And they're just like little kitchen timers. They're like, yay big. I just set it for however much time that I need. And then they can, you know, see that, they get the countdown. The challenge with timers might be if your meeting's running a little over, you're still on the phone and that timer starts beeping or, you know, chiming very loudly, that could be a different kind of disruption if you need a few more minutes. Or again, if your child is very black and white and the timer's going off and you're not there to tend to their needs, and the timer's going off, that might be a little harder for them to understand. So if you do want to use a timer, probably give yourself more time than you actually need, because then your child will be like, hey, mom's done early. And sorry for any dads out there, I know I keep saying moms and dads. So model the expectations. So if you want to use a timer, show your kid how that's going to work. So if you're going to set the timer, so when the timer is set, or when I have this sign on the door, or when the door is closed, this is what that means. And maybe you have to role play it. Maybe, you know, on a Saturday, maybe you have to go line through the schedule and show them what the expectation is for each of the different time slots. And just like we talked about, parents keeping their like work time and home time separate, it's probably going to be helpful for kids to also keep their school time and their free time separate, so that they're not always feeling like school is like a never-ending thing that they never get a break from. And one thing that I didn't put on here was having mealtime with your kids, even if you're working. So when you take your lunch break or your dinner break, if your kid can have that break time with you and you make it meaningful. Maybe you play a game or read a book or whatever it is your child likes to do that together. So if they feel like they're missing out on some of their parent time, then this is giving them a little dose of that, because it's hard when someone's right there next to you or in the same room or in the same house, but you can't engage with them no matter how much you want to, or, you know, they get in trouble if they do, like, then, you know, make sure that the time that you are spending together is beneficial. So, oh, and also about the door hangers or whatever visual aids you use, I think it would be helpful to have one like a do not disturb and it's okay to come in, because I know when I close my door and I have my do not disturb up, sometimes I forget to take it down or open the door. So if you have two of them that you have to like switch, it's going to help get you in that habit. And also is going to provide that visual aid to say, like, it's okay if you need something, you can come ask me. Whereas if there's just nothing on the door, nothing designating if you're busy or not busy, that leaves room for interpretation. So it's like, did mom forget to hang up the sign? Did they, you know, are they available because they took it down? Like, I don't know. So if you can have something to visualize both sides of that, that will also be beneficial. And so, okay, that's all the slides about working from home. I hope that was helpful. I had previously done a whole discussion on social stories, so I'm not going to talk about like in depth like what a social story is, but just like a brief. So a social story is a very simplistic descriptive device to explain to kids, well, to anyone, to individuals, what the social experience they're having is, to describe it in as much detail as possible. Sometimes there can be a little bit of instruction or direction in the social story, but for the most part, we're just describing, and we are doing that so the child can learn to generalize the skill or the situation to other like scenarios and adapt their responses and behaviors and socialization appropriately. So when I created, and generally speaking, a social story, and the phrase social story is copyrighted by the Carol Gray, who created and came up with the idea of social stories, so that's why we call them social skill stories. So usually they are written for a specific individual based on that individual's needs, their reading level, their cognitive level, things like that. So this can be very generic, but the main structure of the story is going to be the same. So if anybody, you know, wants this, has this, prints it out, you can, you know, crosswords out, make it personalized to your situation, things like that. Like, I don't care, I'm not copywriting anything. So this is pretty generalized about working from home, but I tried to make it so it applies to all the situations by being intentionally a little more vague. And again, I do also have a Spanish version of this. So the title of our story is My Parents Work from Home. Again, I tried not to use things like mom or dad, you know, maybe it's grandma, grandpa, whoever it is. Oh, way too far. So we just start out with why we're writing the social story, and what we want the kids to have as like their main takeaway. So coronavirus is making a lot of people sick. My parents are working at home because their workplace is closed. So as much as possible, we want to try to relate a situation back to something that the child has experienced. So just like a parent's workplace is closed, So I do my schoolwork at home because my school is closed. So the kids can be like, oh, so if we say school is a kid's job, right? Like their job is closed, mom and dad's job is closed. Okay, I can relate to that. I can understand that a little bit better. So many people are doing school and work at home to stay safe and healthy during coronavirus. So that's explaining why the stuff is closed. Okay. My parents work from home on specific days and times. So this is a situation where the story probably would have been more customized to the individual, but instead I just made a little graphic there, so that maybe parents can like write in, when they work with a marker or something, so that when they're reading through the story, you can just be like, so what time does mom work on Wednesdays? And the kid can be like, oh, 8 to 4, and they could write it in there. So it makes it a little interactive too. My parents will tell me when they are working. My parents may work in the kitchen, the living room, the dining room, or the bedroom. Again, generic, vague. My parents may work at a table, a desk, or a couch. So we don't want anyone to think that just because you're sitting on the couch in the living room doesn't mean you're not working, right? You're still working in those circumstances. It's important that I follow the rules and show respect to my parents when they are working. So we talked about what kind of rules and guidelines and stuff you can set up in your house. So maybe after reading that section of the story, you have a conversation about what those rules are that you need your kids to respect. And so how are they showing respect? I will show respect by using a quiet voice, keeping myself busy, following directions, and not disturbing or interrupting. So this is our part that's like instructional. So things that you can expect from them, and that they need to do while parents are working from home. And again, I tried to think, what does everyone kind of need in these circumstances? Like, I think everybody would agree that kids yelling and screaming in the background is probably not helpful. If your kids are keeping themselves busy, that's going to be helpful. And if they're following the directions, all those things are helpful. Maybe that looks a little different for everybody, but generally speaking, those are things that we all need. And then we're just, again, reinforcing what the direction was. So it's important that I respect my parents' time and space when they are working from home. So showing respect is helpful to my parents when they are working. My parents can get their work done on time when I follow the rules. So that's giving them some motivation, describing like, hey, if I refrain from interrupting and let my parents do their work, when they're done, like then we can do whatever the fun things are that we like to do. So that's, everybody likes that, right? So a little motivation there. So when my parents are done with work, we can do family things. So here you see the little word bubbles. The kids are like, oh, I'm done with my schoolwork. And the parents are like, oh, I'm done with my regular work. So let's do something fun. And then just some things to remind the kiddos of stuff they might like to do with their family when they're not at school or work. So I like to play games with my family. My friend likes to ride bikes with her family. The neighbor likes to play sports with his family. So that shows using the different pronouns and the different people in the child lives, the kids, the neighbors, things like that, shows like, oh, well, just because someone else's family does that doesn't mean that I have to do that. It's not wordy, and it's not like, oh, well, the people diagonal across the street, they, go camping and they do this and they do that. The kids don't need that much information to be able to make those connections in their heads. They can just be like, oh yeah, different people do different things. So the things that I do, those are okay. And then we just wrap up with kind of the same place where we started to just reinforce. So my parents' workplace is closed. My parents are working at home. I will follow the rules and show respect when my parents are doing their work. It is important for my parents to work at home so that everyone can stay safe and healthy during coronavirus. And I think the little coronavirus sentence on every story I've written since March, whatever day it was, starts and ends with like the explainer about the coronavirus. Just to reinforce that this isn't anything that mom or dad or teachers or, it's not a punishment. It's not something somebody's doing wrong. It's because people are getting sick and we don't want that. That's not good. We want everyone to be healthy. So that is our little social story, which I will share a link to. And again, I don't mind. And a lot of these are posted on our website also. So I have zero problem. Like, direct your friends, your family, download them, print them, share them. Just don't edit them. Aside from, hang on, that's not true. You can edit them, like crossing it out. Like if you want to put your kid's name in there instead of pronouns, things like that. But please don't edit the main idea. Because the words are chosen very specifically to communicate a specific message. So pronouns, or, if you want to put like my sister or my brother instead of, or mom or dad, things like that, by all means, I have no problem with that.